I just want to point out the fact that all the trillions of dollars that we spend on software and on Microsoft in particular, they still can't seem to get their shit together. Have you noticed that? Uh, Software in general will work most of the time, but then often it will just stop working the same way. So you'll be like, oh, this is great. And then, oh man, this sucks. I mean, it's just like uh, the software I use to do video. It'll do like like okay, so you have to pick what part of the screen that you wanna record, right? It's a screen grabber. So I'll do my videos like this. You know, I'll just speak over whatever's on the computer screen. So it'll pick an area to record on, and if you want to pick an area other than the window, because it just automatically sees the window, like this window that I'm in right now, for that's got these tabs open. Anybody who understands Chrome will be able to look at this and see what I'm doing. And then, which is great. So it picks the window, and I'm fine with that. But what it used to do is it used to pick the window for you, but then you could adjust it any way you wanted. Now it just picks the window. And when you try to resize the window, it adjusts with the resizing. Now I don't want it to do that. The only way I could figure out to stop it from doing that is to start it recording, and at that point this area is fixed that you're seeing right now, and then I can adjust the window after it's recording. But I wanted to do that before it starts recording, and it won't do that. Not only that, but it used to have a thing across the top where you could stop and start the recording. I mean, it's infuriating because it doesn't work the same way all the time. So their program, and I'm a programmer, so I understand exactly what's going on. But the fact is you know, that's what debugging is all about. You're supposed to fix these things. Anyway, it's just frustrating, and I just wanted to, you know, vent. Everything, you know, I mean, they should be able to get things to work the same all the time. That's why it's called modular programming, so that you've got a little module, and that module will work the same way regardless. But obviously, modules, when you get bugs like this, you've got modules affecting each other. Otherwise, a module would work all the same all the time. For programmers out there, what I'm talking about is variables, and when variables change, variables are just numbers, but they can change from like 2 to 6 or 6 to 12, whatever. It's it's frustrating, man. And I guess, you know, I'm probably being unfair because it's probably just as frustrating for them. The only difference is they make a lot of money off of it. I mean, even software engineers get paid pretty well. So, except for me, you know, I've been programming all my life, and uh, actually my very first job out of college, they paid me $14,000 a year to program. Can you imagine? I mean, $14,000 a year, even in 1987, that was nothing. I couldn't even afford my own apartment. I had some girl who was letting me live in her house. It's ridiculous, and that's a lot to do with this country, and that's what I wanted to talk about. And it's not just this country. So, I mean, you can listen to Chris Hedges and Robert Reich and all these guys, and they're wonderful. They can impart a lot of good economic information to you, but it's not going to be anything that you either didn't know or didn't hear about, especially if you took a little bit of economics in college, which is really useless, I gotta say. But that's okay. Uh, but it's not anything that you probably didn't figure out for yourself, or when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, well, I could have, I could have thought of that, I mean, yeah, if I'd run across that situation. So I want to explain to you things that you can't figure out for yourself because you don't have the personal experience. Um, Now, one thing that you probably can figure out for yourself is that money becomes kind of pointless when you've got so much of it that it doesn't, when you've got so much money that you can buy and sell whatever, anything you want, including getting people to do anything you want them to do by paying them, right? And as long as you don't pay them enough so that they become like you, to where they don't have to do anything for money, then you have power over them. And in that respect, what is wealth? Well, wealth is time and influence. So it's time in terms of, like, the first thing that I discovered about what wealth really is that it was the ability to have time, your time to yourself, time to do what you want to do. So I immediately found out that, well, especially in my case, and I think it applies to everybody. As a matter of fact, I'm sure it applies to everybody, that how much time I wasn't working was more important than the money I was making. So if I could make $30,000 a year and only work uh, 80 hours a week, that was actually preferable to me than working 100 hours a week and making 35,000, 37,000, what have you. That, however, was not preferable to my boss, which was my dad, actually. But he was a typical vicious capitalist, right? Made him very successful, made him a lot of money, gave him a lot of time off, I mean, because I'm his son, I also would know what he was doing. And he spent a lot of time in his easy chair watching Fox News. I mean, that's just basically the truth. And it's going to be the truth for a lot of people. You're going to find out that the ultra wealthy, my dad wasn't ultra wealthy, but he was one of their trained pit bulls, so he got kind of the same kind of treatment. He was able to, you're going to find out that sure, in the beginning and for a period of time they have to keep up appearances, but then you're going to find out that even if they're sitting at their desk in their office, they're playing with their stuff or watching Fox News or whatever. They're not actually working. They're just there for 10 hours a day so that they can yell at somebody once in a while and push people around. or maybe not even that. Maybe just tell other people to do it. Okay, so basically, I found out that, being wealthy, uh, sure, there's the other side of it, and we'll get to that. But the the being wealthy was having time for yourself, having time where you weren't working, and this is all about working for somebody else. I mean, obviously, if you're working for yourself, that's different. But if you're working, if you're getting your bills paid and you're doing your own business, taking care of your personal affairs, right? If you're making your own personal phone calls, if you're socializing, if you're working on your own computer program, or if you're building something, or working on something in your garage, or mowing your own lawn, whatever. That's your time, right? So I quickly found out that being wealthy was really about having your own time. And after a while in my job working for my father, I very often would just take my own time because I knew that it was more important. And of course he didn't like that, and eventually I'm sure that was part of his decision to try and get rid of me, because I became so valuable within the company that I could make money very quickly and I didn't have to work, because I became so quick and so good at what I would do. Kind of like, well, I'm done with my work today, see you later, right? But no, in a capitalist system, that's not how it works. They will find you something else to do, right? And I know. I had to manage people for a while, and then I worked on my own. Anyway, so how does this relate to Jamal Khashoggi and his situation? It's something that you can't figure out on your own because you had to be there. So when I was in Saudi Arabia, I found out that if you were Saudi Arabian, and that included people like Jamal Khashoggi, even though he was not Saudi Arabian, he's a Turkoman, just like his cousin, Adnan Khashoggi, and his father, Mohammed Khashoggi. Now, but technically, as a Saudi Arabian, you're split into two classes, and one is the royal family, and that's kind of hard to understand because they actually kill each other to be the head of the royal family, and then obviously everybody directly descended from you or ascended from you, your descendants, whatever, are all royal. And this is another reason why you idiots out there who watch television, glued to the television, watching the British monarchy, you're dumb fucks, okay? This fascination you have with the British royal family, you need to get over it, and we need to make Britain dump the royal family completely forever, saying they're no longer royal in any way. They're just like any other British citizen, because this is affecting the whole world, right? Because it's so representative of the whole piece of shit system, the real system, and we call it kind of shadow government. We have our own little oligarchies going, and all of it needs to be dumped. Nobody is any better or more important than anybody else in any system. No system is better or more important than anybody else. America isn't great. Senegal isn't great. Well, we're all just countries representing our own people, and in that respect fighting amongst each other, which at some point we do want to get rid of too, but we're not going to be there for a while. So back to Saudi Arabia, okay? So the royal family, they just have as much money as they want because they print the money and they distribute the money. And so when I was there, the royal family and by the way, at the time there were only like 20,000 Saudi Arabians. And they were people like Jamal Khashoggi and all the Khashoggis, even though the Khashoggis weren't actually Saudi Arabian. And in that respect, you were Saudi Arabian only to how close you were to the royal family. So you were Saudi Arabian because they say you're Saudi Arabian, even though you're actually from Syria. But you're there, you're living there, you don't have any connections anymore to northern Syria. Like the Khashoggi family, they pretty much they kind of lived everywhere. They had houses in London and just everywhere. And they shared them amongst themselves. And they were kind of like Saudi royalty, but they weren't. And here's how it worked. Okay, now, obviously people can make their own money, and that gives them a certain degree of independence. And in respect to being Saudi Arabian, you really needed that. Because, as you can see, as long as you're very close, as long as the royalty likes you and doesn't see you as dangerous or a threat in any way, then you're safe in their country. But as soon as you better be able to get the fuck out of there if all of a sudden things go sour, right? Which they obviously did. Now, as far as the money goes, okay, and wealth, because this is where there's a relationship between what I was talking about earlier on a personal basis, and it's a little bit different in Saudi Arabia, right? So the king and his, direct relatives, they just get straight up money anytime they want, as much as they want. I mean, there might be some theoretical boundaries, but for all practical purposes, it's limitless. On the other hand, and by the way, people were so rich back then that, like, one of them had a bathtub and gold coins would come out of the faucet, and that supposedly was how he kept track of how rich he was, how much money he had. These gold coins, and obviously it's all for show, but I mean, really crazy, right? I mean, crazy stuff. And here's the point. You're probably going, well, what's your point, Martin? Well, my point is that the king had all this money, right? And He has all these people who he's calling Saudi Arabians, like Jamal Khashoggi. The Khashoggis, um, even other Saudi Arabians who typically, I mean, their families had been there for thousands of years. I mean, you'll notice that the last name of this king isn't bin Abdul Aziz. Well, uh, it ends in Salmon. Like you might be more closely related to the Iranian Salman Rushdie, right? So, you'll notice that, and I'm like, wait a minute, everybody I knew was Prince Khalid bin Abdulaziz, da 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 da. I mean, they got all these names, but bin Abdulaziz, and you would think that every single one of them, their last name would be Saud, right? Which is their way of saying Saudi. We call it Saudi. Um, and I suppose somewhere in there is. And all of these people would be former Bedouin tribes, right? People who lived in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. And of course, they were very related, very closely related to the Yemeni tribes and Muscat and Oman, everything on the Arabian Peninsula, right? And technically, whether most people will admit it or not, Lebanese call themselves Arabs, Syrians call themselves Arabs, and I suppose there's some blood mixed in somewhere, because the only real Arabs would be people who are genetically pure from the Arabian Peninsula, which is Saudi Arabia. Just look at a map. Let me see if I can bring up a map. I'll just go to the weather map real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. So here, right? And if you look at it carefully, it actually becomes part of the rest of the Middle East. So obviously, when Muhammad and his empire started spreading out with whoever, Ali and all these people that you'll hear about, they obviously spread very quickly north and across Egypt. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about Arab, right? So the king of Saudi Arabia, the royal family, had all this money, and I'll just get right to it. What they did was they said to all other people who they called Saudi Arabians, like the Kashoggis and all these different families, I believe Omar Sharif, and is they said, well, we'll lend you money. We'll lend you money. Okay? At zero interest, and you never have to pay it back. So this was like the ultimate payday loan. Because there's no such thing. I mean, if they don't give it to you, you might as well just count on the possibility at any time. I mean, they own you. And this goes for American lenders. This is why Elizabeth Warren is right. But it's not like she invented worrying about owing people money. You never want to owe people money. I mean, it's just a reality part of the system that that they, it's highly representative of the power that they have over us with or without lending, right? These people, they control us and they manipulate us. And basically they just want us to work for them. I mean, this is all about slavery, right? When you get right down to it, it's just an economic slavery. So what they did was they lent people this money, and of course then those people took that money and they made lives for themselves and they made wealth for themselves. The guy that my dad worked for, when I learned all of this stuff, I was here. And this is where a lot of the shit's going on. Let's go to a different kind of map that gives you a little bit better. Okay, these guys have some kind of problem now, so switch to a different kind of. So, when I was here in Dammam, which is Dammam Al Khobar, it's very close together. This is where, well, I met Bin Laden on the plane, but this is where I lived, and I only lived there in the summers and in the winters, in around for a month in Christmas, and then 3 months I'd spend because I was in boarding school. So when I wasn't in school, I'd be there. And the rest of the time, of course, I'd talk a lot with my parents and stuff on the phone, and they would come and stay with me. So Khobar City, that's Al Khobar. And I forget where we lived. I think maybe out here somewhere. Now, so these are the dangers of lending, right? Of borrowing. And in this case, with this situation, you wonder, how does even a king just say your money is mine? How did the king of Saudi Arabia, or the prince, this crown prince, this Mohammed bin Salman, this MBS guy, how does he just imprison everybody in a hotel in Riyadh or Jeddah or wherever? I think it was in Riyadh, which is the capital. Well, it's simple. All that money was made, any money that they have that's their own now, was made off of these loans that they got for free. And he just says, hey man, we want our money back. And as far as that goes, any money that you made by using our money belongs to us too. Although it's really just a benign form of a more ruthless reality, and that is, hey buddy, you're in my country, I have all kinds of police and thugs, and I can grab you anytime you want and threaten to kill you if you don't turn over all your money and your assets. It's really just feudalism, right? And it's yet another reason why we need to get rid of all royal, all of this, anybody being better than anybody else, anybody being treated better than anybody else, anybody being able to control and influence anybody else. The only influence and control should come from a system which is fair and equal to everybody. And yes, that's very possible. It's very easy to do. All you have to do is do it. All you have to do is write out the laws, write out the system, create the model, what have you, that is fair. And we all know what's fair. You know, every time we get screwed in the ass by somebody, we know what's fair. We know when we're getting, I mean, I know when my butt hurts. This isn't like rocket science. It's not brain surgery. It's just, well, I want to be able to get through my life and have the things I need, the things I want, you know, that's different. And of course, the system that I'm talking about should work as hard as it can to give me the things I want, but it should definitely, within the framework of reality, give me the things I need. So we all know. And one thing we know for sure is monarchy, oligarchy, what have you, doesn't do that. We know that these people who appoint themselves, at some point in time, they appointed their families as being more important and better than all the rest of us. And we need to do away with that. We need to become nations and eventually a world. And within the nations and the world eventually, let's do it as nations first, because that's just the way it goes for now. But never lose sight of the idea that we want to do it for the world, because we're never going to get rid of all the suffering and horror in the world. And really, isn't that what the system that I'm talking about should be based on? Is making this world a place where every human being, obviously there's always going to be some people somewhere, but hopefully not. Maybe we can create a world where I can look down on it, you know, and say to myself that within reason, every person and even every little animal is happy, or at the very least not in horror, you know, suffering, despair. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? I mean, good people, that's what they are. They think about that. You know, good people like me, we feel it. You know, I know that people are suffering here in the Republic of Congo. I don't even need well, maybe I do need the news to know that. And maybe that's why I'm a journalist, is because I know how important the news is. So, okay, so I'm not psychic or anything, but I am empathetic. I do feel sympathy, empathy, whatever you want to call it, for all these people from here to there. And I know from the news that people here, like Brazil, are suffering at the hands of these narco-European, you know, and I know that brown people are suffering. And I also know that they're overpopulating the earth and, in that respect, creating their own suffering. So I know that we need a system that takes all of this planet, and we decide we have to have scientists, teams of people who just beat their heads against the wall, understanding how many people and what we need to do to make this world that is here, that we can see here, these are satellite images, that make it a place where everybody, all these people, can live in harmony and happiness. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, that's it. And I suppose to a lot of people that's obvious, but until I say it out loud, it's not obvious to me. Because I look at the world and I say, well, if somebody walks up and, they tell me that to get out of my house or wherever I'm living and trying to make a life and trying to become one of those billions of people scattered across this map that I'm looking at, wherever, I'm trying to make a life for myself, then of course I have to wonder, why am I worrying about all these billions of people scattered across there? Well, I'm worried about it because if we don't take care of them, what takes care of me, right? Because I want to be able to live in a system where everybody builds wealth. Obviously, that's how we, if you're able to just go plop down a pile of paper or mark off a number in a computer and get a house, that's a lot easier than trying to find the materials and build it yourself. So of course the system is desirable. Unfortunately, the capitalist system is not desirable, because out of all those billions of people spread out across this map, many of them take advantage, use the capitalist system. So billions of these people out of the 6 or 8 billion, and they say it's going to be 10 billion soon. And can we do that? That's why we need scientists, and we need to do it scientifically. Now, what is that? It's so bright. It's probably salt, huh? That's funny that it could be so bright on a map, huh? And this is probably Salt Lake. That's why it's so white. So yeah, I mean, sorry. Didn't mean to do that, but that's what we need. That's what we need. We need that system. It needs to work well. It needs to plan well. It needs to get people to stop popping out babies all over the place until we figure out how many babies we can take care of. Everybody's the same. We just don't want to suffer. We don't want to be in pain. We need to work together to create the best possible world. And I'll leave you with that.